All right. First, I wanted to welcome everyone to what I believe is week 5 of ANTEC. Thank you for joining us during your quarantine. I know that my wife is keeping track, and for the Lyons household, our kids have been home for what is now 45 days. And so it's been a bit testing, but I'm sure that we will get through this together. We're very excited this morning to have 2 exciting keynotes for you, both related to the world of sustainability, which I know is a very hot and key topic within our market. So if we think about it, our SPE used to have a sustainability division. They have shaped that to focus on recycling, but we're going to learn today that there's a lot more aspects of that we can get involved with. So with that, without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Kevin Hanrahan, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for the Technical Polymers Division within Arkema. Kevin has been within Arkema for 26 years and in various technical roles, business development roles, and also general management roles before taking on and leading the global marketing initiatives for the last 4 years. He is based in King of Prussia, and I can say that he is a mentor of mine and someone that I learn from on a daily basis. And so I am very confident that you will take away key messages from this as I have in the past. So with that, Kevin, the floor is yours.
Super. Thank you very much, Jason. So I'm going to click on share here, and I hope that I'm able to give my presentation. So please let me know when you can see this, and that would be great. How we doing?
Good to go, Kevin.
All right, great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My promise to you regarding the next hour is the one promise I will make is that I'm going to tell what I think is a really happy story. And we crave happy stories these days for many reasons that I won't get into. But sustainability is a buzzword. You can't go anywhere these days without seeing it in a million different places. But my job over the last 3 or 4 years that I'm going to share with you is to really develop the message. I'm not here today to try to sell you on anything except on the concept of storytelling and how it pertains to sustainability. Without getting too philosophical before I jump into this, to me, if you can't tell a human story, then it's not a story worth telling. So my story today is absolutely human. You're going to see a lot of faces. And if technology is our friend, I'm going to show you 2 videos that we're very, very proud of. So I'm going to jump into the details here. Today, the objective is really to share with you some chapters in our sustainability journey. And I'm hoping that at least once or twice you'll say, that's interesting. And that's something that we could add to our message. If 1 or 2 of you get that, then this will be a success. The story that I'm going to tell is a very human journey. I'm going to take you into the fields of India where the castor beans are grown, and I'm going to share a little bit of the lives of the farmers and the families. It's an emotional, and I hope it's a very provocative message. And again, we'll break into my presentation with 2 little videos that I'm happy to share. And another important point is that this is not without challenges. And you'll see an overwhelming theme of my story here today is, guys, don't greenwash and don't sugarcoat your message. Tell the entire message. And there's going to be some warts, and I'm going to share with you that we found some warts as we went through this. But sharing and addressing those warts is absolutely, in my opinion, actually the most important part of the journey. So the polymer that I represent is called real sand polyamide 11. I'll get into a little bit of detail. And it has a kind of a sister set of products called Pebax or new. But for years and years and years, we said they're bio-based. And if you type in bio-based, you'll probably end up on our website somehow. But that's not enough. And the second sentence here came from a consultant that we engaged with at the beginning of our message. And she was very clear in saying, look, a crop, just because you come from a crop, does not make it inherently sustainable. In fact, it leads to many, many more questions. And if you're not ready to ask those questions and answer those questions, then you're just not ready. And that is the essence of the journey that I'll take you on today. It's really finding out the true story behind the feedstock. There's always going to be positives. There's always going to be negatives. As you develop your message, you should embrace the positives and you have to fix the negatives. And then it is a repeat cycle. You have to keep doing this. So I'm going to give you a little bit the basics and the background. This is as close as we're going to get to polymer chemistry today, so it's not the most technical discussion. But then, as you can peek ahead here, we're gonna bring you on a deep dive into the feedstock and the castor farming in India. So here is the supply chain. The castor plant is grown in India. From the castor plant, we harvest the seeds. From the seeds, we squeeze them to get castor oil. And then Arkema is the only producer in the world that can make the monomer, which is called amino undecanoic acid, or amino 11. So you can see there that the castor oil is an 18 carbon. And we have a proprietary chemistry that goes back over 70 years, guys, that we know how to split the C18 into an 11 and a 7. And the 7 goes into other lubricants and fragrances, perfumes, and stuff like that. But the 11 portion is our feedstock to make polyamide 11 and the polymer itself. So that's basically the chemistry behind the polymer. This is a little bit more detailed. I'm really not going to get into it, except to say that once you've got that amino 11, you can make a whole bunch of different polymers, copolymers, homopolymers, flexible block copolymers, and random copolymers, and blah, 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 blah. So there is a huge range. I'm not speaking about one particular grade here. I'm really speaking about a whole family of products. I don't go so deep in the applications today here, guys, but I would say on the left-hand side, Rilsan is really dominated by pretty heavy industrial applications, you know, chemically resistant flexible piping and tubing and air brake tubing for trucks, and for deep sea oil production under the ocean and stuff like that. And over on the right-hand side, the P-Banks group is, these are elastomers used in super high-end performance running shoes. If any of you have followed, you know, the breaking 2-hour marathon and all that kind of stuff, it's completely linked with that P-Banks technology. So we're very lucky. Again, you know, I just remind you that we don't speak about commodity at all. These are truly high performance polymers. They're sold on meeting performance application that other polymers just simply cannot do. And these are not cheap. These are not low price materials, which is kind of an exception in the world of sustainable, because generally when people are speaking about bio-based and sustainable, they're generally talking more in the commodity space. So our message is a little bit unique in that we're one of the biggest, I would say, bio-based, near the top of the performance pyramid. And we have a pretty rich legacy. We call it our proven legacy. A very rich story. You know, to be brutally honest with you guys, this chemistry was not born because it was bio-based. It was born because it was needed. In 1947, the world was developing polymers for World War II applications, and the French were no exception in their quest to develop polymers, and frankly did not have access to crude oil and to fossil fuel feedstock, and were kind of forced to innovate on what was available to them, which was castor bean. And of course, at that stage, nobody cared whether it was bio-based or not. But they developed polymers, again, very high performance, and have developed and survived over more than 7 decades now. And of course, in the last few years, the bullet bio-based moved from the bottom of the list up towards the top of the list. And frankly, as we moved it up the list, we just made it a little bit stronger by saying, yes, it's bio-based. Yes, it is renewable. It comes from India. You know, we don't think it really competes with food, and you know, a few other things. We don't think it causes deforestation. And as it became more important, we kind of developed the bullet, but we had no story behind it. And again, that's what I'm going to bring you into very quickly. So over on the left, I've already told you this is how we sell the product, and it is absolutely driven on performance. And the top one is one that you should just keep in the back of your mind, because it is truly a very lightweight material, and that comes into play in sports and automotive and aerospace and many things. And then again, now we're really going to go into this third one, which is, you know, we use the word sustainable. We say it's not just bio-based. Well, if it's not just bio-based, what is it? So so here we go. So the first point is always going to be, you know, the most obvious one. And that is, if you take a bean, it takes less than 1 year to produce it. Of course, the carbon that is ultimately going to end up in the polymer come from this bean is derived from atmospheric carbon. I don't think I need to go any deeper on this, except to say that we can do some carbon-14 analysis, and we can prove to you that 100% of the carbon in Rilsan is indeed coming from what we call modern carbon, and not from something that took a million years to produce. So this is the most basic message of all. And then you have life cycle assessment, and I'm really not going to get into this today, because this is not really the subject of my story, except to say that yes, we can calculate all of the impacts, and we can show that if you compare it with polyamide 11, if you compare it with polyamide 12, which we also make, by the way, you're looking at approximately a 50% decrease in carbon footprint. But that's not really the message that we want to get to today. So so this is always kind of slide number one, and it's technical, and it's a very, very complex story. But now we're gonna take you much deeper into the story. So yes, we are recognized, and so there are many big brands. I pull out BMW as just one. But there are many big brands that are really driven now by true sustainability, and they are recognizing us for our actions. And these are the actions that I'm now going to explain as I take you on a fairly deep dive into the world of castor farming. So all roads lead to an area in India called Gujarat. Depending on who you listen to, it's either 75 to 80% of the world's supply of castor beans come from this tiny region. I can give you a million reasons as to why that is, but basically it's a kind of a desert, arid type. In fact, you can see it a little bit in the picture there. But that type of, they call it marginal soil, is actually perfect for castor. And I'm going to get into quite a bit of detail here. So step number one in our journey is, and this is where I kind of start to give a little bit of advice on if you can take benefit from our stories. Point number one is you got to do a baseline study. You can't sit in your office in the US and just say, it's grown over there and these are the features. You've really got to put boots on the ground. And we went into to India with a third party, and that's also an important point. You don't do this yourself. You get a third party to go in, and they spoke with 1,000 farmers to really understand, what is your life and how do you do things and what does your life look like? So that's where we started. And we start to develop statistics, guys. And I'm going to bombard you on the next few slides with a lot of little statistics. Some of them are just kind of, oh, that's interesting. And some of them become much more than interesting. They become highly pertinent to our message. And the first one is, there are over 700,000 farmers in this region. Now just think about that number for a second. That is a staggering number. You can round that up to almost 1 million people. And then if you, we'll give you another statistic in a while, that these are all family-owned farms, and each farm is like 4 or 5 people. Well, if you take 5 people times 700,000, now you're talking about 3.5 million people that are dependent on this crop. So that is really a staggering number. So now we really start to derive our first conclusions here, that if there are 700,000 farmers, then these are pretty small farms, and these are not big monopolies, right? And that is, in fact, absolutely true. And that's a trend that I'm going to develop over the next few slides. And that is, in fact, a pretty favorable message. So when you go to your end user like BMW or Nike or whatever, they want to know these types of things. And it is good to be able to show them that this is not a big monopolistic, big farming type of community. In fact, it's completely the opposite. So at this point, I'm really hoping that technology is going to be our friend. And I'm going to ask our assistants here to play video number 1. And I particularly hope that the volume will work, because we did have some volume issues when we did our training session here. So here goes. I hope you can see this.
There are almost 700,000 castor bean farmers in India. 80% of the world's supply of castor oil originates here. The vast majority is grown in Gujarat. When the castor bean is crushed, almost 50% of the weight is extracted as oil. The remainder is called cake or mash, which is most commonly used as fertilizer. The average size of the castor farm in Gujarat is small, usually just 1 or 2 hectares, or less than 5 acres, and most farmers raise cows for dairy produce and grow 1 or 2 food crops. Castor planting is usually done by hand, as are the frequent weeding tasks. They harvest the beans 4 to 5 times per year, beginning approximately 4 months after planting. Castor is considered a cash crop. It is profitable and easy to sell in the open market. It is openly traded in a huge number of crop trading yards across the region. The farmers typically own their own farms. They are overwhelmingly male, and their average family size is 4 to 5. There is no direct competition with food, as castor oil has no nutritional value for humans or animals. Castor farming in this region does not cause deforestation. The land here is semi-arid and not forest-rich. The farms have mainly been in existence for many years. The farmers usually prefer to grow food crops in their highest quality soil, while castor is grown in their most marginal soil.
Super, Ryan. Thank you very much. That worked really well for me. I hope everybody else heard it. It was really great. So hopefully we're back to my screen. Jason, can you confirm?
Not yet, Kevin.
Do I need to click on share again? I'm going to go ahead and do that. Hang on.
There you go.
Thank you. So look, I hope you enjoyed the video. We made that video ourselves. We're very proud of the fact we don't use agencies. We do our own, production work. So almost every sentence in there, several of the sentences sounded kind of trivial and just kind of, oh, by the way, but you'll see as I go through my next slide that several of them subliminally answered some pretty tricky questions that can come from your customers. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll probably bring you back to some of those sentences here. So now we begin. Look, a bunch of statistics, guys. I'm not trying to sell you today, but I'm just trying to show you a little bit of how we tell our story. So if you can pretend for the moment to be a BMW or somebody that may be interested in, investing in Arkema's technology and their sustainability story. The top one is, we interviewed 1,000 farmers. So that's not 10 farmers, that's 1,000. That's a lot. So statistically, the points that we're going to make here are quite well proven, I would say. And then 95% are also involved in dairy farming. So why do we even care about that? Well, that's showing you that these families are not completely dependent on castor. They balance it, and we show that they also grow food. So balancing, you have food for your family, you have dairy that can provide some nutrition for your family and can be sold as a very stable commodity, I would say. And a very important point about castor was mentioned in the video, that it is easy to sell on the open market. That's a way of saying that these farmers treat castor like they treat cash. If they need money, they sell it. If they don't, they'll wait for the price to be high. And the price is openly available and easy access to the market. And that's really the point that I made here on the left. Castor is known by them as a cash crop. So they also have dairy, they also have food. Practically 100% of the farms are owned by males. So we did mention that in the video. And this is a big negative. So probably the second point that I want to make about our journey here is, guys, it's really, really, really intelligent not to sugarcoat your message. So when we speak to our big customers, we tell them that this is a problem. You know, we're a French company and we have very strong CSR, corporate social responsibility programs. And anything that is predominantly or overwhelmingly male is a problem for us. So here we try to address it, but it's a cultural phenomenon. So we have to be a little bit careful here, guys. That, you know, we might be able to change an individual's practice in a positive way by affecting how they farm and whatnot. But to affect a cultural change is beyond the scope of our capabilities. So in fact, we try to take actions within that scope. And I'll get to that a little bit later, that we try to nurture a little bit the younger females within the family, just to show that we're taking some action in the right direction. These are the top 5 reasons why the farmers, and so these are really the positives that come out of our study. It's profitable, it's easy to crop, easy to sell. And it's ideally suited for poor and marginal soil. Now that's really, really, really key here, guys. I'll bring you back to that several times. The farmers have a legacy in the country. Their fathers and their grandfathers and whatnot did this. But 100%, all 1,000, when we say, why do you grow castor? What's behind the crop? They say that it lifts their standard of living. So here's a much stronger connection now if you're dealing with, again, with a BMW or a Nike. You know, we're not just saying, hey, Rilsan is, our PBACs are new. We're not just saying these are bio-based. We're saying that these polymers lift the standard of living of thousands and thousands and thousands of farmers in India. And we say that because it's absolutely true. A little bit more here, and I think I've already made this point here that the farms are usually very, very small. So why is that so important? Again, it shows that you don't have these giant monopolies, you know, taking advantage of a fairly poor community in India. So that's actually a very, very strong point. Here we just show the growing cycle and the harvesting and everything, and I'm not going to get into any detail here, except to give you a little bit of a sneak preview that one of the negatives that we found, which can be a really big negative, is that in fact the castor crop consumes a lot of water. Now, for those of you that are driven by LCA, life cycle assessment, that's not a good thing. So you would look at the castor crop and you'd see a very favorable carbon footprint and many favorable bio-based, but then when you come to water, you say, yeah, but you consume a lot of water compared to other crops. And that is absolutely true. But then when we understand the program a little bit more, you see that they plant in August, and then it grows in September, October, November, and those first few months are driven, in fact, by the monsoon. So you have a huge natural rain phenomenon in India. So yes, of course, it does consume a lot of water, but in fact, that water consumption is derived from a natural phenomenon of the region, which is in fact the monsoon. We also know that the castor bean is very drought tolerant, by the way, so that's good. So it will survive even if they don't get a good monsoon. But then as you get close to the harvesting, you do want to irrigate, and you do want to use some water to drive your yield. And that's a very important point as we get into the next phase of our development, which is training the farmers. And that's our way of saying that training them on efficient irrigation is a major deliverable of our program. So a little bit more detail. We learn from speaking to 1,000 of them that in fact they don't really understand efficient yield very well. Plant spacing, they're I can say a little bit primitive in that they think that the more they plant, the more densely the planting is, the more dense the crop will be, and that's actually not true. So there's an optimum spacing. And all of these little things that we're learning will come back in the next phase, which I talk about, which is the Pragati program, where again, we're going to teach the farmers, not just to keep doing what they've always been doing, but to tell them, in fact, that they can improve their situation. We also learned a very interesting, but somewhat kind of unrelated thing, but we asked them, what's your biggest problem? What's the biggest headache that you have every day? And in fact, they said that the roads are terrible and power failures, that if they're pumping water, the power failures are really, really, really terrible. And that will come back much later in our program, that, if we want to help these farmers, maybe we could consider lithium-ion batteries and solar panels and stuff like that. We're not there yet, by the way, but those types of elements are really, really super important if you're going to tell a really good sustainable story. And down at the bottom, one of the most important ones for us is that they use the poorest soil for growing the castor crop. So they have good soil, they'll use it for food, but if they have bad soil, they'll favor the castor. And that is a very attractive sustainability element. A negative, basic knowledge of chemical hygiene is low. They wrap a scarf around their mouth, but they don't use the face masks and everything that are provided. So for sure, we need to train them on how to use gloves and train them that, to take better care of their health and stuff like that. So I'm going to skip a lot of these because, again, I'm not trying to sell you on the product here. 50% of the family helps in castor farming. Only 9% of them practice intercropping. That means between the rows of castor, you can plant another crop. And in fact, that is an important part of our sustainable farming program, to teach them that they should do, in fact, much more of that. Okay, water is really a hot topic, guys. So I've already mentioned top left that it's called a kharif crop, a term that we never heard of before, but it takes advantage of the monsoon. So here you see that we start to develop really good answers for our customers when they ask pretty difficult questions like, why does it consume so much water? The second one is that the farmers use flood irrigation, which is exactly as it sounds. They just pour water all over the field. And of course, in that hot, humid environment, you get a lot of evaporation, and it's not efficient at all. So again, we'll get to the Pragati program in a while, but an obvious element here is that we teach them how to dig what are called furrows, these little tunnels along the root system, so that you can target the irrigation and therefore take advantage of the monsoon, and then also take advantage of targeted irrigation rather than flood irrigation. So again, basic knowledge of water was very poorly understood. They didn't understand the mulching technique. So again, we helped them in that. And then, okay, some very important points, and you saw it in the video, I hope, that, as soon as you talk about a natural crop, people are going to ask the basic questions. Does it cause deforestation? And clearly, it's a pretty easy answer here. We have a technical reference at the bottom, but to make it very simple, Gujarat is just not a forest region to begin with. These farms have existed for many generations, so they're not chopping down trees to clear land. So it's a very favorable aspect. We always kind of knew that it was, but it's good to have the proof now. And over on the right, we think is probably even more important than that. Anytime you have a natural polymer feedstock that has competition with food, you're going to have some challenges here. But castor oil, in fact, has no nutritional value at all. It's not used in human food. It's not even used in animal food. So, so that's a very favorable thing. And then another question that people will always ask is, what's done with the remainder of the cake or the mash after you make the castor oil? And honestly, it's just used as fertilizer. So it's kind of a closed loop system, which again is very positive. So these are all really good things that we found. On the right here is going to be the absolute lightning rod for any time you make a claim about a product that comes from a farm, particularly in India, because India clearly has some problems with child labor. So here, I think I'll probably get into it a little bit more in more detail here, but here's one where you don't want to make any claims that you just can't support. You cannot say there is no child labor. Look, we've been involved in this market for many years. We've seen no evidence, so we look for it. And in the interviews of the 1,000 farmers, we had the third party actually look and examine the farms. You'll see, I keep saying that we'll talk about Pragati, which is the sustainable program. It is an essential element. If the farmer wants to claim that they're making sustainable castor oil, they have to certify, they have to be audited. We have a code that we'll share with you. So again, you do as much as you possibly can to find out. And now we move into phase 2 of Pragati, and we've made the decision that we'll hire some auditing firms that will even go to the schools to make sure that the children are attending the schools there. So again, the only answer we can say here is that we look for it, we don't find it, we have a policy against it. Arkema will not buy from anybody that where we see evidence of this type of thing, and we are testing for it. And that's as much as you can say. You cannot certify that there is no, but it's a very, very difficult question. Okay, I'm just going to move ahead a little bit here. And again, I've mentioned this point many times, but it's very important that the castor crop is easy for them to sell. And many of the farmers, they actually hold on to some of the crop, and they sell it when they need cash, when the price is right. And when the price is low, they hold on to it. So look, this is kind of the executive summary of after interviewing 1,000 farmers, what did we learn? We learned the highlights, and I'm not going to repeat them because you've heard me say them several times. But I think even more important than the highlights, you learn about what are the things that need to be improved. And classically, it has been irrigation, basic chemical hygiene. Those are obvious. The basic crop spacing, gender equality. And another thing that we learned is end user awareness. And what does that mean? That means that in fact, when we go to our end use customers like BMW and Nike and Apple Corporation and many big companies, when we want to tell them about, they don't understand the story. So how do you create end user awareness? Well, you create a PowerPoint, just like I'm showing you now, and you create the video that I just showed you, and you bring the content to your customer, and more importantly, you bring your customer to the content. So we bring our customers now into India to see all of this for themselves. And the more you can share the storytelling, which I'm attempting to do with you right now, the more you do that, the more they will embrace your program, and the more you can increase your end user awareness. So out of all of this, the bottom part is by far the most important. We created the Pragati initiative. I'll explain to you what that is, and the Sustainable Castor Code. So the code on the right is a document. It's like 80 pages long, and these are all of the things that you must do, and they pertain to all of the little statistics that I've showed you so far, that all of these must be adhered to if the farmer is going to claim sustainable castor and if we're going to purchase from them. So here it is. Look, on the right, it's a very obvious program, but you do your baseline study, you identify the strengths, you identify the weaknesses, and you create an action plan. If you do not create an action plan, then you're just greenwashing, and you don't have a story to tell. You implement in the field, which I'm going to show you now. You report the results, and then you do another baseline study, and you do this all over again. So on the left-hand side, I just show you some little images of the documents, the Castor Code. We have a brochure about the Pragati program itself and the results that we've achieved, and all of these are available on our website, or I can send them to you. So driving improvements. It's not enough to just show a beautiful video. You have to drive and affect the situation of these farmers. So what is it? It's a program to improve sustainable castor crop production by good agricultural practices, increase their yield, increase the income of the farmer. And both of those obviously go hand in hand. Efficiently use water, efficiently maintain the fertility of the soil, take care of the natural resources, drive adoption of good waste management, enable better health, better safety, and of course, the overarching principle of the respect of human rights. This is the Pragati program. These are the members. So it's Arkema, it's BASF, it's Giant Agro, who is a producer of castor oil. And the essential element here is Solidaridad is an NGO. They are the implementing partner, and they are the people that teach. So they actually go to the farms and teach them on the code. And then the fifth element that is not mentioned here is you have an auditable, a third-party auditable auditing agency that at the end of the year will actually check to make sure that things are being implemented. And here we just show you a picture of Solidaridad in the field, and they're teaching the farmers. Here's just some statistics on castor crop. I'm not going to bore you with all of these details here, but you can see probably several elements that were mentioned in my slides earlier. And this is what the code is. So this is the nitty-gritty stuff that your customers really want to see. These are the things that will make or break their sustainable program. And these are the impacts. So after 3 years of Pragati, these are the things that we can show. I'm not going to get into too much detail here, except to say, we have 3,000 farmers, which sounds like a pretty good number until you consider, wait a minute, there's 700,000 farmers. So it is a drop in the ocean, but again, that's probably another key message that I'm trying to give you here, is that no matter how overwhelming the project is, you've got to start somewhere. So we started with 1,000, now we're at 3,000, and now we're getting to 7,000. Will we ever get to 700,000? No, but you have to start, and you have to take ownership of your particular area as much as you can. Top right-hand side, this is a staggering statistic, but it's true, that by teaching them a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of chemistry and a little bit of water management and a little bit of intercropping and spacing your crops and everything, a 50% increase in yield. So you can see that the farmers benefit a lot when they see a 50% increase in yield. Each contributing farmer, participating farmer, has received a safety kit and pesticide storage kit to improve, and 25% increase in water consumption. And if you follow my story carefully, obviously water consumption is linked to yield. So if you multiply the 50% yield improvement times also the improvement in water efficiency, you start to get aggregating benefits. So I'm hoping now that I can turn it back over to Ryan, and we're going to watch video number 2, which is a little bit less passive, I would say, than the first one. It's not just, hey, here's the story. This is now going to show you, I hope, the impacts that the Pragati program has made.
The Pragati project is an initiative that was launched in 2016 in Gujarat, India, to enable the production of sustainable castor crop. This region produces approximately 80% of the world's supply of castor beans. There are almost 700,000 castor farmers in India. Primary end uses for castor include lubricants, coatings, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, and high-performance polymers. These products are often celebrated for their bio-based origin and their low carbon footprint. Water consumption has been lowered by approximately 25% in the demo plots where water utilization has been monitored. The sustainable castor code, called Success, has been published. The Success code strictly prohibits child labor and forced labor and encourages gender equality. We thank the Castor farmers and their families for their commitment to the program. We invite more farmers and end users to join us. Pragati is the Hindi word for progress.
Super. So I was able to hear that absolutely wonderfully. So I hope everybody else did too. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and we're on the home stretch here, guys. So I'm sorry that I hit you with so many statistics about Castor that you probably didn't dream that you'd spend your Monday morning listening to. But I hope you agree it's an interesting story. So Pragati is the Hindi word for progress. And allow me to really be philosophical here, because I think that's the key sentence there, is that it's all about progress. As soon as you make a claim, guys, and it doesn't matter what your claim is, as soon as you make a claim about sustainability, there will be somebody that will counter your argument. And as soon as you say it comes from a crop, as soon as you say it has favorable this or a favorable that, somebody will challenge you, and it is a sensitive topic. So the more you can frame your discussion in terms of progress, not absolute success, by the way, but progress. Generally, people will really warm to that message. They do not warm to a big company saying, you know, we're declaring success and look at us and look how great we are. So you have to be as humble as you can, and I'm sure I'm not being very humble as I show you these slides. But when we deliver the message to our customers, we really, and the best way to be humble, by the way, is to ask them for their opinion. So if anybody is kind of taking notes here and borrowing from our experience, a huge benefit to this program, which I can't really capture in a slide, is to invite your customers in and ask them, you know, bring them to the fields and actually ask them, you know, do an audit, you know, come back and give us suggestions. They really love to do that, and for them to play a role in this program for progress is a super way to do it. At the risk of stating, you know, what is completely obvious here is that our story here is very human and it's very visual, and people love to see the faces of the people involved. So I hope you kind of agree that video is a really good tool here. And the only tool that's better than video is, again, to bring your customers to the field, to show them the story and in the most human aspect that you can. A big challenge for us from the very beginning is that generally in the world of polymers, when you mention bio-based and sustainable, there's an awful lot of confusion. When we say biopolymers, a lot of people think that means biodegradable, and that is absolutely not the case here. So just explaining the very basics from the beginning is really important. They also think two big assumptions. They automatically think that bio-based means more expensive, and they also think that bio-based means not quite as good as the real thing. So we always lead with the fact, and again, I bring you back to my first slide, that the polymers that we are promoting here are driven absolutely first and foremost by performance. We will never just sell on the basis of a beautiful story like this. We will sell on the fact that we solve problems that other polymers simply cannot do. And then this is, we hope, the icing on the cake. Again, I hope I'm stating the obvious, that when, you know, 10 years ago, we were developing this sustainability message, it didn't have any teeth. It was just a kind of a nice add-on to our story. But now it's becoming an absolute essential element to our program, and several big OEMs will only deal with us on our bio-based platform and do not want to talk to us about fossil-based alternatives. Here, just a few little visuals. I think these are very basic and very simple. But again, the farmer on the left believes that if he plants more seeds, he'll get a higher yield. In fact, we learned when we went there that all you end up with there is a very tall crop, and a very tall crop is very difficult to farm. And in fact, the bean productivity per hectare or per acre is actually much lower. And on the right, over on the right-hand side, I hope you can see the putting distance into it, kind of like you would grow, vineyards, vines in California. I'm sure it's the same thing. And then our experts in Solidaridad can teach them. I hope you can see this little targeted furrows then for targeted irrigation. And they can even teach them to plant another crop in between here, and it will not be in conflict with the castor crop. Again, beforehand they would flood everything, and now this is not the most beautiful example, but you can see a little bit more targeted irrigation. We don't get into too much detail here today, but regular health checkups was something that they really did not embrace. And when Solidaridad goes to visit them, once a month or once every 2 months, they're really encouraging them to take care of their medical situation. So again, we did the baseline study. As a result of the baseline study, we created the program, which is Pragati. Pragati now moves into phase number 2. So we're amping it up a little bit. I think I showed you that we had 3,000 farmers, now we're scaling it up to 7,000. Continued education on good agricultural practices, just keep increasing the content. Involving more females in the supply chain as much as we can. That is a difficult challenge, I can tell you. And then create greater awareness of downstream users, which is a little bit what I'm doing today, I would say. So we've re-upped our project, and we'll continue for another 3 years. And I'm sure we'll continue far beyond that. So behind all of that is a little subliminal message that we showed you near the beginning of the program today. And that is that Arkema will invest and is investing as we speak in a new monomer and polymer production site in Singapore. It will be, obviously we have a few little delays now because of the global crisis, but then we're targeting the beginning of 2022, so 2 years from now. And this is a huge investment for us. It's over 400 million euro investment. And this new plant will be, in fact, 100% dedicated to castor oil feedstock. So we are absolutely putting our money where our mouth is, I would say. And that brings me to the end. So I am a little bit, quite a bit ahead of schedule. Jason, I hope that doesn't cause problems for the timing here. But I would just remind you that if you would like any of the content that I presented here today, please just request it of me. We're very happy to share things as long as we share them the right way. But the slides that I presented, in fact, are copyright, and I would not like them to be taken without permission. Okay, Jason, it's back to you. Do we have some questions from the group? Or?
Yeah, so perfect. Thank you, Kevin, very much. There are some questions that have already been populated. For those that are out there, if you do have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A button on the bottom, and then we will address them as they come in. So Kevin, one through the Q&A method, and then also through a private text to me that came in, was asking about other countries besides India that the monomer can be sourced from. And in addition to that, it was with specific reference, is it only based on the climate, or is it a combination of climate and cost that drives it to India?
So that's a super question. Again, I depending on who you listen to, it's either 75 or 80% of the world's country. And it's pretty easy to see when you get there why. It's just the perfect climate. The monsoon timing, again, is perfect. You're planting during the monsoon when you really need the water. They have the perfect balance, again, of the food crop, plus the dairy crop, plus this cash crop, which is very favorable to what we want to see. If you look for other countries, there are several other countries. China is one. I believe Brazil is probably number 2, and I think China is number 3. And then there are various pockets around the world, like Mozambique in Africa. But if you were to look at ones that are truly viable, we would probably look mainly to Brazil and to China. So will we look to source from Brazil and from China? The answer is, of course, yes. But now you open up a whole other set of challenges that would not be necessarily addressed by Pragati here. An obvious one would be, you know, deforestation. We're very, very firm in our claim that we have no deforestation issues here in India, and we want to keep it that way. As soon as we move to Brazil, obviously that's ground zero for deforestation challenges. So we would have to make that first and foremost, that you know, there has to be a certification program to protect the forests and whatnot. So a long-winded way of saying, of answering your question is, we do want to look outside of India, but very cautiously and very opportunistically, and only if we can make the same types of claims that we are currently enjoying. The supply situation in India, again, because you have so many farmers, it's quite balanced, it's quite comfortable, and it's quite okay for us. But I do recognize the point that yes, it would be beneficial to us to have the second country, and we are absolutely working on that as we speak.
Just a quick follow-up to that. There was a follow-up that asked if there were any regions of the United States that are suitable for castor bean growth.
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that, actually. I'll have to take that as some homework. It has never been mentioned in any of the discussions. You know, I sit in a lot of meetings where they put up, you know, the kind of the heat map all over the world of where castor would be. I've never even seen a blip in the USA. But I really don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Another question was related to if you can comment on the harvest and how much is actually used for chemical production versus other applications such as health supplements.
Yeah, so when you crush the castor bean, it's almost a 50-50. So you get 50% becomes oil and 50% becomes the cake or the mash. So that 50% is turned into fertilizer, and that's basically the end of the story there. On the oil side, I think the #1 application in the world is for lubricants. So it's used a lot as a bio-based lubricant for jets and you know, big heavy equipment. And then you have, I would say, polymer production is probably #2, and then you get down into some other applications, personal care and cosmetics that are really quite fragmented. But I would say big, heavy industrial lubricants is #1. And coatings and polymers would be #2. And then you get into more of the personal care and healthcare would be #3.
So there's two questions that are in line with what you just mentioned. And so one just came in as you were speaking as, can you comment on the fraction of the production of castor beans would be used in the production of PA11? So of all these 700,000 farmers that are out there, do we know how much of it actually goes into polymer?
Yeah, you know, these are not numbers that we really are super public with. We are the only producer of PA11. We have a lot of people trying to figure out exactly, you know, how much goes where. Except to say, I guess I can give you one number. Yeah, you know, look, we purchase about 1/7 of the world's production of castor oil, and we are the biggest consumer of castor oil in the world. So if you do a quick calculation, you can probably figure out a lot from what I just said there, but that's about as public as we would go.
Okay. And in your last comment, you also mentioned that 50% goes into the mash. There was a question related to, are there alternative uses other than going into fertilizer for the mass, potentially such as composite materials?
Yes, that's a great question. I have heard, but really this is just kind of anecdotally. Yes, people are working, and I think this work is going on in Japan, to take some of the fibers and to actually compound them into the polymer itself. So it's kind of an interesting story that they get separated. The oil and the mash get separated at the very beginning, but then way down line in an industrial setting, they get recombined. So yes, these are kind of a bio nanofibers, but I am definitely not an expert on that topic. But yes, some of that work is definitely being done.
So in one of your slides, you mentioned that it was a male-dominated culture, and then you briefly mentioned something related to increasing women throughout the supply chain. Can you comment on any other initiatives that can be done?
Yeah, so we get a little bit philosophical here. We have to be super careful because, again, I tried to say, you know, changing culture is just beyond scope here. You know, there are other elements. You know, they have the caste system in India, and if you just make a rule and say, well, we will not subscribe to that, then you're going to lose all your business. You just can't do that. You want to do that, but you just can't. So, you know, you take baby steps. And again, the name of the program is progress. So anything you can do to make progress is worth doing. So in the area of women and women empowerment, you know, when you go there and you visit the farm, you don't get that feeling it's male dominated, but in fact, when you ask the questions, you know, who owns the farm? 100% of the farms are owned by males. So that's one way of saying that, you know, you can't just make a rule to say, well, 50% of the farms must be owned by women. It's just not going to happen. But what you can say is, hey, as we're auditing and as we're implementing, we want roles. We want the women, we want the mothers, we want the daughters, you know, to play a role here. So we do specifically call out separate things, and we want the women to be more involved in the supply. So we do write that into the code. And then an element that we're considering, although we haven't pulled the trigger on this, but I don't know why we would not, is we think that it might be very nice to sponsor some educational programs. In other words, you know, scholarships, which could be for high school or it could even be for college. Why not? Where we, as members of Pragati, we could participate, where we would actually sponsor scholarships specifically for females, where they can go to high school and go to college to study. Why not? To study about agronomy and to study about castor oil and a kind of an end around way of educating them into a position where they would play a role in the furtherance of this industry. So that's much more philosophical and less practical, but we think that it's a very good idea. Now, we haven't pulled the trigger on that. We have to debate this a little bit. We always need to make sure that we're not breaking any local laws or creating more problems than we're solving. But that's just a way of kind of explaining to you that there are kind of end around ways of addressing this issue. Jason, I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yep. There was a question related to whether or not we are working with the Food and Agriculture Organization, so FAO, the United Nations, to discuss more of this story and get it out there between some collaborations between sustainability and the polymer industry.
So it's an excellent question. The answer is no, and we're not doing any of that yet. But as we develop, you know, we've really just kind of created our story now, and now it's time to tell the story. And we're learning very quickly what is probably fairly predictable, in that this is not a story that you just go into your purchasing guy and say, hey, you know, I'm going to raise my price next week, and here's the latest Pragati video. You know, that's just not going to do it. Which is a way of saying that we really need to look at, you know, who are our stakeholders here, and the stakeholders are not always just your customers, by the way. The stakeholders can indeed be NGOs and people that may be, you know, somewhat against your industry a little bit, can in fact help you. And as many independent agencies and government agencies as possible. These can be very difficult to reach. It's not an easy sell, but absolutely yes. So we're beginning to open this message up to as many people as we can. And I kind of alluded to the fact that we invited some customers over to our event in India in January. Some of the first video pertained to that. And indeed, when we sent the invitation out, somebody kind of invited themselves, which was the Japanese government. And particularly in Japan, they are extremely driven by sustainability and renewability, and biopolymers play a huge role. And we had an attendee from, in fact, from the Department of, I don't remember, I think it was the Department of Energy, I don't remember, which would never have hit our radar screen. So the long answer to your short question is yes, we definitely need to look far beyond our traditional customer base.
Okay, there was another question that came in that was unfortunately a bit late at the beginning, and so they missed the first slide or two. And so they wanted to know if you can review the applications for these bio-based projects. And that kind of goes in line
Sure.
with, I guess, are we seeing in general specific markets that are more interested in the sustainability message?
Wow. Okay, so that's a really great question. So the traditional applications, which have developed over decades, by the way, and are not necessarily driven by sustainability. Okay, but I'll get the traditional markets, and I mentioned we have two families of products here. We don't need to get into too much chemistry here, but we have the real SAN is the pure polyamide 11. And then you have the P-backs. P-backs are new, we call them, which are, we use the polyamide 11 and we make block copolymers that are elastomers. So on the real SAN, on the traditional real SAN, they are very traditional markets. They're automotive and aerospace and powder coatings that go into dishwasher baskets and things like that. Industrial tubing, flexible piping and tubing, stuff like that, where you really need a combination of toughness and flexibility. And also generally there's an element of chemical resistance as well. So probably the poster child would be the air brake tubing that you see hanging on the side of a big truck as you go down the highway. It needs to be flexible, it needs to be durable as hell, it needs to be super strong, and it needs to be chemically resistant. So those are the types of traditional applications. Now, the air brake tubing, they don't care if you're bio-based or not, for sure. But that's one whole family of extreme applications. And I'll just temper that with one other one, which is these giant flexible pipes that go down to the bottom of the ocean for producing crude oil. And again, you know, just unbelievable technology. These pipes sell for $10,000 per meter. It's just unbelievable constructions. And again, obviously they don't care about bio-based. They want performance, right? So that's the whole family of polyamides. And then over on the elastomer side, probably the most famous and sexy market for us is in sports. So any high-end running shoes, if you're going to get you know, the Nike shoes that set the 2-hour marathon record, you know, Adidas, Reebok, Under Armour. If you just Google, you know, running shoe and P-backs, you'll see just a million of those. And so those are the two big families. In addition to shoes, by the way, also used in medical catheters, a completely different market that go into the human heart. And the elastomers have this just a very, very special energy return, which makes them favored in those types of markets. But then the big question on top of that then is, if you put sustainability on top of all of this, what are the markets that really, really drive sustainability? And maybe it's not so obvious, maybe it is, but anything that is close to the consumer is definitely going to get your attention. And the further away from the consumer you are, the less important it seems to be, except big companies that are driven by CSR, corporate social responsibility. So I'll go back to that in a second. The more obvious ones are ones that are very close to the customer and want to tell the human story. And the perfect example there would be the running shoe. Okay, so is it feasible now that the big brands will now start telling the Pragati story and the story of the farmers in connection with the shoes that you can buy that are bio-based and everything? The answer is absolutely yes. We see that as a huge, if you're going to buy a pair of shoes, not only are you helping the environment because it's sustainably grown and everything, but you're also helping a human population, and you're also enabling better education and living standards for this huge community. We think that story is highly relevant as you get closer to the consumer. So now you can look at consumer applications that are more maybe kind of luxury oriented and much higher, where in fact they may be using a commodity plastic but would want to move to a higher end plastic, not only on performance but because of the story that you bring. And again, the answer is yes. So moving into luxury consumer goods, we definitely see an opening. Now, I want to go all the way back to the beginning, this huge category of kind of industrial applications where purchasing person really doesn't care. So what can we say there? In fact, there you look at a totally different way of selling, which is CSR, corporate social responsibility. So there we have big customers. Again, BMW is a great example. They want to be able to tell their shareholders that we do support renewable energy and renewable materials, and we do embrace higher social standards. But but they're not going to hear your message if you don't bring that message to them. And that's a whole program that I'm speaking about today, is to bring that program not to your purchasing person, but to actually go in at a very high level and speak strategically at the corporate social responsibility level. So Jason, to answer your question, new markets that are closer to the consumer, and I would say higher OEMs and higher, bigger companies that are driven by corporate social responsibility. Those are the two specific targets that we have.
Okay, thank you. There was a question that came in related to Arkema doing its part, related to trying to improve women in the workforce in this supply chain. And so is there a reason specifically why Singapore was chosen for the plant? Is there something related to the culture there that helps promote and push that in the right direction?
That's a great question. I mean, the main reasons for choosing Singapore are, first of all, we have a philosophy of supplying the region from within the region. So today, we have only one polymer plant, and that is in France, and it has been that way for 70 years. So for sure, when we decided, hey, it's time to make a huge, and this is really for us, this is a mammoth investment, 400 million euros. We're certainly not going to put it in the same region, so that there was no consideration given to putting it in France. So then it came to, are we going to put it in North America, or are we going to put it in Asia? And our biggest growth is in Asia. So to be consistent with our supply of the region from the region, it was in Asia. And for those of you that that followed what I said, you know, we are still the only producer of amino 11 and the polymer in the world, despite the fact that it's over 70 years old. So there's got to be a lot of know-how. Otherwise, people would have copied us by now, right? So that's a way of saying that IP and protection of IP is extremely important. And Singapore is very favorable in that department. So in terms of the port receiving the castor oil from India, if you take a look at a map, you'll see that it's very favorable. And then in terms of exporting into Japan and Korea and China and everything, extremely favorable there too. But I would say probably the overwhelming reason was protection of intellectual property. So that's probably the main reason for Singapore.
And I guess that may be the answer. Another question just came in and said, why wouldn't we choose India as a location for the plant?
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure that I was really involved in those discussions, but I think I can hazard a pretty good guess that you know, we have lots of operations in India, actually, but it's a difficult country to do business in. You know, the bureaucracy is absolutely staggering. IP is kind of medium, I would say. It's not as big a risk as China, but for sure, you know, you saw that the farmers are even frustrated by the poor quality of the roads and poor, not very dependable power supply, and those stories are just so famous all over India that probably India was not high on our list, to be honest with you.
Okay, and then the last question that is here, Kevin, is that you mentioned greenwashing in your presentation. It was a question that came in regarding whether or not it's working and passing the, I guess, the red face test with the customers that are out there.
So it's a great question. So I can't give you the definitive answer, except I would say that it was my job, you know, to build this story. And at the beginning, when I look back, I'm quite embarrassed because, you know, our first attempts at building the story was to just talk about the positives. And, you know, we didn't make any mention of the risk of child labor in India, or that, you know, we saw that the water consumption was actually not as great as we thought. And, well, oh my God, how do you? So probably the best lesson that I learned is we spoke with a consultant. I won't mention who they are. And honestly, we didn't spend much time with them. But, you know, they said, look, if you come out with a story and a policy that just denies, hey, you know, child labor is the classical example. If you were to say there is no child labor, nobody will believe you, okay? It's not a credible message. You have to show that you've identified the weaknesses, and in the cases I just showed you, you know, clearly chemical hygiene and water efficiency of water consumption. Those are two things that are weaknesses. But advertise that they are weak. And then the most important thing is to show that you're doing something about it. And that was the creation of Pragati. And then you have to show the results of what you're doing about it. And then you do the story all over again. So the only thing I can say is I did get a chance to present this whole philosophy in Japan back in November to the Japanese Organic Recycling Association. It's a big organization. And I was very happy to see that it passes the red face test in Japan, which is one of the most difficult countries. So again, you have to show a balance and don't make claims. And that's why I'm very proud of the name. The name means progress. We're not claiming that it's a complete success. We're claiming that we are making progress.
Okay, thank you. With that, Kevin, you have answered all of the questions. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Super.
So thank you very much. Guys, for everyone else down there, and there's plenty of people in the audience, our next speaker is Adam Malofsky, and we're going to get started with him in about, I'd say, 19 minutes. And so that gives us time to do some bio breaks, refill that cup of coffee. I know that I am personally empty, so I will take advantage of this as well. So
thank you, everybody.
Hi, Jason.
Sir, good morning. How are you?
I am good. So you'll share screen and I'll just push play, right?
I don't do anything. Staff will be handled by everything. So when it comes to at 10:29, I will start talking. I'll read your bio and then give the screen to you, and then you'll have it and you just share screen and off you go.
Sounds good. Yep, that's all I wanted to know. Perfect. You having a good day?
So far, so good. There was, it ranged between 70 and 80 attendees during the first talk. And then there was probably 6 questions. There was a lot of text that were coming in, but mainly just making statements, not asking questions. So we'll see how the afternoon goes. You have to get them all riled up.
I can get people riled up if I need to. It's just kind of a weird thing, right? Not having the people in front of you standing there.
I hear you.
There's no immediate tactile feedback. So I'll see how I do, but I'll try not to talk low and drone on or any of that kind of stuff. So
Well,
tell me about your business.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Tell me about the polymer you sell.
I manage our PEKK business, so polyether ketone. It's I would like to say the big brother to PEEK, so everyone's familiar with PEEK. So mainly replacing metals, and with the idea of lightweighting to save on fuel emissions.
Yeah.
So almost everything I do goes into aerospace.
Higher temp than PEEK, lower temp?
It depends on what you're looking at. The TG is about 20 degrees higher than PEEK,
Okay.
but the melting temperature, depending on the grade, can be lower. So it's an interesting polymer. I think PEEK is a fantastic material.
Mm-hmm.
If PEEK works for the application, then PEK is not going to. We're basically looking for extremely niche markets where PEEK may not be able to withstand something during that area that's TG plus.
So curious question, do you guys have small, short chain oligomers, 4 or 5 repeating units, anything like that? Functionalize?
So that's the functionalization is it's a difficult aspect of the material. That there's really nothing to log on to. That is where PEEK does have an advantage. I know there's lots of people that have functionalized PEEK. PEK is a little bit more difficult, and it's because of the structural rigidity of the backbone that gives us the boost in TG compared to the material.
Sounds cool. Sounds cool. Done a lot of work in my past with high TG polymers.
It's a fun material to work with. It's a new space. My previous business prior to this was impact modifiers for PVC. So
very different.
Yeah, I went from one extreme to the next.
Yep, lights on fire, all kinds of fun things. Very cool. Yeah, take a look at our company does it sometime and give you a little familiarity. I'm gonna go get a cup of water here.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I got here, Jason is a couple of lights in my face to get better light. So I feel like I'm gonna get hit like a deer, Hopefully I don't get hit by a real car.
I put this the background behind me to shut out all of my children's playrooms. We used to call this the man cave, and then once we have children, it's now the playroom. So the man.
Yeah, they take that over, don't they?
Now it has doll houses and stuffed animals and transformers and everything else you can imagine.
Things to step on at night.
Yeah. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Ours are big and more expensive, but they're getting independent. So my son is 25. He's going back to school for his MBA now in the fall. And my daughter, Nicole, is 23, and she's getting her PhD in bioengineering with a focus on polymers. She's printing corneas and things like that.
Very nice.
Yeah, so we're blessed. Our kids are good, but Legos was a big thing in our house, and we still have an entire bedroom that's just Legos, dedicated to Legos, with a walk-in closet, have about 500,000 pieces.
Yeah.
And a giant Lego castle with village and everything. And it's pretty realistic looking, but it was always entertaining to my family when I would just walk down the hall when my kids are littler. And, you step on Legos and get a lot of foot injuries, fall down.
Yeah. Yeah, both of my kids are really into building with Lego as well. And so there was that show, I don't know if you watched it, called Lego Masters.
Yeah,
I
can give you a couple of websites if you'd like. One is called Lugnet, Lugnet, was started by MIT. And Lugnet has pictures of literally, and videos, hundreds of thousands of Lego creations.
Wow.
And it has all kinds of instructions how to make things. It's where we learned how to do the castle and everything that we did. And so you have Lugnet. And then it started for the Lego robotics like 20 something years ago. The other one where you can buy pieces in very large volumes, like thousands of individual identical pieces, is called Bricklink.
Okay.
And that's just bricklink.com. They originally were called BrickBay, and then eBay came after them. So they changed their name to Bricklink. But like if you want 5,000 of one particular piece your child keeps losing, or a particular figure that you want to have around, right?
That's it. Is it more expensive than the Lego store?
It's actually a lot less expensive.
Wow. Okay.
A lot less expensive. I mean, the collectible things, they're pieces literally 70 years old. Obviously, that has no market, so it's more expensive, right? You can't just buy. But what people do is they go to flea markets, things like that, and buy all the people's old Lego sets, and then break them all up, put all the pieces, and so yeah, that's how I acquired it. Otherwise, 500,000 Lego pieces would have been far too expensive for me, right? So
yeah, if you do the math, they're about a dime a piece is what they charge it for in the sets.
Yeah, you can get it down to about depends on the pieces, down to 1 or 2 or 3 cents a piece.
All right.
For a lot of pieces. So it's it's just something fun. The kids, if they really like it, can get pretty into it. My son, I think, has 150 stormtroopers for his Star Wars stuff. I mean, he's grown up now. And then he had, I don't know, my daughter got into it. They actually had knights, little knights, but they had breastplate, if you will, and lipstick on the heads. And so we have, I think, about 100 of those because she said no fair. And then I stumbled across the fact that they made female knights. So she was very happy.
There you go. Well, we're gonna get started in about a minute, Adam. So I'm gonna pull up your bio and I can get ready to get going. So welcome back, everyone. I want to thank everyone that attended the morning session, and we are going to follow suit with another wonderful presentation by Adam Malofsky for part 2 of what I would deem our sustainability structure. If you weren't here in the morning, thank you for taking time out of your quarantine, for joining us to learn a little bit more about what we're doing. This is, I think, according to my children, day 46 of quarantine. And so we're getting through this together, and I'm sure that the end is near. So with that, I wanted to introduce Adam. Adam is a 30-year veteran of the performance chemicals, polymers, and materials industry. So Adam has a PhD. So Dr. Adam Malofsky has held numerous leadership positions from corporate America to a range of successful startups. He focuses on consumers, materials, and manufacturing trends and opportunity identification, subsequent evaluation, assessment, and finally, where logical, venture creation through all the way through commercialization. Adam is known for identifying white space opportunities and then employing practical, high-speed, value-oriented development strategies that frequently allow for the successful commercialization of new technology platforms, not simple evolutionary improvements. With 7 ventures completed or in progress and dozens of new materials and manufacturing products and methods commercialized, Adam thoroughly enjoys when someone says it's impossible and then proves it is indeed possible. Adam received his BS in chemical engineering from Lehigh, and I know we have several Lehigh professors that will probably be in attendance, and both an MS and PhD in polymer science from the University of Connecticut. Adam now lives in Cincinnati, Ohio with his wife, Robin, and they have 2 children in college, Brandon and Nicole. So with that, Adam, the floor is yours.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen here and pick my desktop here. And can you see my desktop now?
Yes, sir, you're good to go.
All right, so go with the slideshow. So I guess to kind of open this up, I'm a pretty passionate guy. I've been in the polymer industry a really long time. My father's also, I guess, an icon in it. So despite every attempt to run away and not be a polymer person, I have been sucked in and I'm a polymer person. And he spent, he has almost a 50-year career, 55-year career now. He's 82 and continues to work mostly with me and my group. But you get a passion for chemistry. I love the creation of all the things that you can do, whatever it is, whether it's in medicine, whether it's automotive, making shoes, food. I love to cook, whatever it may be. And I find with our industry, the plastics industry, polymers under assault in so many different ways. And then watching some of the switching now with COVID-19, plastic gloves are now a great thing. That we need to change things. And so my talk here centers on what I call principled, proactive, positive plastics. And, you know, our circular economy is emerging, but we need to do more engaging. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is kind of the battle we're under, how it happened, and what we can do to change everything. The first thing is, who are all of us in ANTEC and beyond? Who are all the people who use plastics? We're regular people. We're good people. I was just talking to Jason here. I've got Legos all over my house, too many cats. I like to garden and cook. I'm just a regular person. We're all regular people. We have friends, parents, children, grandparents, all the things, all the people that we're trying to do good things for. I find when we're assaulted, the plastics industry, the company is said to be evil or bad. The plastic is bad. Things aren't bad, things are things. And the net is that they're really accusing all the members of a company, whether it be Dow Chemical, BASF, smaller companies, startups. Essentially, the implication is we're all evil, rabid folks trying to kill the planet, even though we happen to be living on it. And it's simply not true. And to a certain extent, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to not simply be good people, to not simply be people who enjoy the industry that we're in. But in the end, as I'll close about 20 minutes from now, 25 minutes from now, we need to defend our own way of life and what's good about it, admit what's wrong with it, and move forward. And it's something that I don't think happens often enough. Bottom line is, we enable a modern world. From consumer electronics to the clothes you wear, to the refrigerator you have, the computer you're looking at right now, the headphones you may be wearing, carpet, flooring, the building you're in, the plane you fly, the train you ride, the sports you play, camping you might do, the cooking you might do, all impossible without having plastics, without having polymers. Indeed, under the auspices of COVID-19, the burden of COVID-19, without polymers, there would be no cure. There would be no intubation. There would be no hospitals. There would be no gloves. There'd be no way to care for us. I think it's important for us to, again, send that message to ourselves, be proud of what we do, and realize without us, there is no modern world. We're not the only material. There are lots of others. But without us, the rest of this world simply does not function. We'd essentially go back to 1850. So what do we see today? I'm pretty aggressive on LinkedIn. Many of you may have read articles I've written or comments I've made. We see a lot of virtue signaling opportunism, including even within our own industry. but with brands. Plastic's bad, get rid of straws. I find it amusing when we watch Starbucks. I go to Starbucks. And to replace the plastic straws, they put a plastic sippy top. Not sure how that works, but obviously someone thought they were doing a good thing. Maybe, maybe not. But that comes from politicians. I'll say plastic's bad. I'll say I'll save the oceans. I'll save the planet. It comes from the media supporting all of these stories. If it bleeds, it reads. Dead turtles, dead whales, dead this, dead that. And then even brands. I found it amusing. You don't hear anything about it now. When they tried to find a way to make toothpaste tubes, makeup packaging, not with plastic, a one component piece with a cap, but a multi-layer paper nightmare using polymeric adhesives, polymeric coatings, polymeric films, but you could feel the paper on the outside. And it really belies the things versus people. We're saying things are bad, not the people and what they do is bad. And that leads to a lot of problems that really aren't true, a lot of challenges that really aren't true. Fact is, a turtle, if it gets stuck on a straw, can get stuck on a stick, piece of metal in the water. So let's talk a little more about this. Bottom line is people pollute. And in some regions, it's extremely so. Plastic didn't get there on its own. And if we look at this map here, this is from our World in Data, the share of global mismanaged waste, which is not just plastic, but every material that we know about. We look here and see that in Greater Asia, particular China, we see massive, massive amounts of waste being mismanaged, whether it ends up in rivers. You know, I couldn't put every video picture on here. Here's some people picking up trash on the beaches out in Asia, Africa. But the bottom line is there are rivers that are literally polluted to the point where the water can't flow, where it's literally choking with garbage out in Greater Asia. Yeah, there are places where it may occur elsewhere, but there it's everywhere. It's like an epidemic like COVID-19. It's awful. 90% of all the trash is generated in Greater Asia that's mismanaged. All right. Over 80% of mismanaged waste comes from only a few countries, Indonesia and China dominating. All right. But the US and Europe, despite all the contrary, less than 1% is mismanaged. Now, some people may come up and go, oh, we're shipping all our garbage to Asia. I've done a lot of analytics on all of this. That's simply not true. We're talking somewhere on the order of 1 billion tons, all right? Trillions of pounds of trash mismanaged in Asia. We've shipped, if we're lucky, a couple of percent. We're not responsible in the West for all of this. We consume a lot, more than anyone else in the world, it may seem, but we're not simply tossing in the ocean. But we still have our share of mistakes as well. We can go to, again, people polluting, but where is the plastic that's mismanaged? Now we see a broader area. We see China, India, Africa, even Russia, parts of Eastern Europe, parts of South America. The fact is 13% of all trash is plastic. It's not 100%. Without plastic trash, we'd likely see all other trash quadruple at least. So why the focus on plastic? Funny, it may come out, we'll talk a little more about this later. The fact is it floats and it's seen. People assume metal can be recycled, wood will rot, ceramics are rocks. The fact of the matter is it floats in the ocean and everything else sinks. It doesn't mean it doesn't cause a problem. Doesn't mean clay paper doesn't pollute and sink. Doesn't mean that animals can't choke, die, consume the garbage that's in the ocean that's simply not plastic. Only 13%. There's a responsibility by all of us to clean up our trash, to not even look at it as trash, but as a resource. But the fact of the matter is plastic is not a big part of this problem. So then we can switch around to some other subjects, some things you might hear in the news. The fact of the matter is, people say plastic particles, they're in us, they're in us, they're in us, they're in us. Okay, what does that mean? No one's dying of plastic particles. Fact is, went and did some analytics with a group of other guys and gals, and looks like we might actually consume maybe 0.25 grams of plastic a week. Not sure how that's happening, but it looks like we might. Fact is, polyethylene and polypropylene dominate global production. And the fact is, they have almost 70 years now of clinical studies on using polyethylene, polypropylene in body. Realize that somehow, theoretically, after 32 years, you might gain a pound of plastic. I don't know of anyone who's had had their body checked after they've passed away, all right, an autopsy, if you will, and found a pound of plastic in someone's body. That just doesn't happen. We can look at it a different way. What's context? If we look at the whole ocean, I don't know if I can count all these zeros, but 0.0000005% of the ocean is plastic. It could go up 1, 2, 3 orders of magnitude. You still wouldn't notice it. It floats. People point a camera at it. They know it's there. It's an easy target. But the fact is, you can see these numbers here, 1.3 times 10 to the 18th tons of water, 6.3 times 10 to the 9th tons of plastic. Oh, it sounds like a really big number. All the plastic, by the way, that's ever been produced. So that number, that 0.000 whatever 5%, is of the cumulative all plastic ever produced in water. The oceans are not filled with plastic at all. It's simply untrue. Should it be there? Probably not. But the exaggeration with a number that they show is the 6.3 times 10 to the 9th tons. It's a big number. They'll show it with all the zeros. It scares people. They're not us. Most of us trained in polymers. It's a wrong thing to do. Plastic particles are not killing us, and they're not filling the ocean. Go to another thing that's under assault, single-use packaging. Single-use packaging enables, it doesn't kill and destroy. Yeah, we want to make sure it's all recycled, all handled. We can talk about that later, but without single-use packaging of all kinds, here on the left we see some meat, pills, beverages, all kinds of things, electronics, medical devices. Shelf life is extended. Safety, because that shelf life is extended. Because we know it's sterile if we're about to use it to treat someone, say, who has COVID-19. And an interesting little thing, which is interesting, is aside from glass, which breaks pretty easily in general, we can't make glass bottles super lightweight the way we can a plastic bottle, all right? But visually, you can see through most plastics by design. I can see the product. The impact that has had in the retail environment, particularly for grocers, is monumental and hard to define. I also can visually see if the food is bad, if something's wrong. If I have a can, I'm waiting till it bulges. No one wants to play with a bulging can. If I have glass and I drop it, breaks. And that gets to less weight. There's a reason why we switched from glass bottles to plastic bottles. It's less energy. It's easier to handle. I can put more stuff on a truck. All these things say that single-use packaging enables, it doesn't destroy. I can go over here and say, all right, what else? And this was probably the most complex one. Those of us, especially those technical in the polymer industry, the fact is we have unique capabilities, not just lightweight, but complex variable parts, components, materials. I can't take a bunch of metal and package a bunch of tuna, okay, as a pouch. I can make a can, but it's heavy, it dents, it can't recover if it gets dented. What we're able to do is make anything from a tire, so most of the electrical components in a phone, B-1 bomber, plastic bottles. It's incredible. Too much focus has been put on the embedded energy of a material. So if anyone's ever not heard of embedded energy is all the energy it took to make this material, to make this piece of polypropylene per kilogram, to make this piece of steel, to make this composite. But that's not the whole story, is it? An LCA, an honest LCA is the real story. Not just what energy went in to make the thing, It's the energy that you might save by using it. So can I take that plane and can I lightweight it? I was talking with someone just before, our moderator, Jason. If I can jet out the aluminum and put in a lighter weight plastic, the fuel that I save, the energy, the emissions I reduce, that's not included in embedded energy. But the media, radical environmental groups like to talk about embedded energy. They like to say how it's a lot more inexpensive to make a ton of iron or steel, say low carbon steel, than it is to make most plastics. But the fact of the matter is, I don't need that much material versus the metal. You can play with calculations and some win, some lose. But when you take into account the entire way a plastic might be utilized, like lightweighting, the impact is tremendous. You can look at this electronic device like your phone or the computer we're all on right now. The fact of the matter is, it wouldn't exist. So doing an embedded energy study doesn't do any good for a component that cannot be made of metal, that cannot be made of glass, that cannot be made of a ceramic. We look at a tire here on the upper left, impossible with any other material, period. So we're delivering a set of properties through our industries, through our work we do every day, one way or another, that matches nothing. It exceeds everything. Delivering a story nowhere else is possible. Another really interesting thing. We can produce our materials from a myriad of ways, whether it's from microbiology, deriving it from plants, from gas, from oil. Where else can we do something like that? What other material can be made this way? An infinite variety of forms, infinite variety of properties and capabilities that simply can't be matched anywhere else. It's a stunning, safe, variable capability, and it's delivered to us by nature, made real by all of us. The other intriguing thing is, oh, I can recycle glass infinitely. I can recycle metal infinitely. You know what? Yeah, you can do that. We've talked about how heavy it might be. It doesn't have the right physical properties. It may break. But the fact of the matter is, we can recycle plastic indefinitely as well. And if we stretch our definition from simply recycling to reusing and repurposing. So we have a picture of a road here on the upper right. You have the extreme in the Netherlands where they're making roads out of recycled plastic that are literally big components. Might be 3, 4, 5 feet chamber underneath the road. They can put all their electronics. You can walk in there. You can do whatever you want in there. I can change out pipes, change out electrical connections, and I literally set the road and it's there. I don't have to make a mess. But you can flip it and go to, say, India or Africa, parts of the world where they have no roads. And suddenly they have a home for all their trash. You take the plastic, you take bitumen, you actually get a road that's stronger than the current asphalt roads we have today. And now suddenly I can put that plastic into that road and that road might last 100 years. I can simply take plastics, certain ones, and this technology is just beginning to emerge. Some like it, some don't. But the fact of the matter is, you can depolymerize, and there are new ways to do that. PVC is one where there's a tremendous activity. Obviously, polyesters would sound like they might make sense. I've seen all kinds of technologies over the last 25 years that have been applied into essentially bioproducts, things like wood cellulose, where I can essentially put it under extreme pressure, under extreme conditions, and basically crack it back into materials. That can be done with plastics. I can basically make oil, in that kind of an economic description. I can crack it and get a whole variety of chemicals and then reprocess those as well. And of course, I can reprocess these plastics. So I've done work in the last half decade now with a variety of people who are recycling plastics. And one of the funny things that came out of it was the simple fact that you could take a recycled plastic and you could, say, polymerize another monomer within that recycled plastic and upgrade its performance where it actually could be better than the virgin material. No, I really seem to think about doing that. So there's a richness, not just in how our materials can be made, how the starting materials can be sourced, but what you can do in almost an infinite variety of ways with what shouldn't be termed waste plastic, simply be termed plastic, and it's a resource. All trash is really a resource. Every LCA, some of you may know Chris McDermott. He actually lives here in Cincinnati with me. Not my home, but he lives here in Cincinnati. Every LCA proves that plastic is the best overall choice in almost every application for which it has a shot of performing. One of the graphs I like to post every once in a while on LinkedIn and send to people who seem aggravated with me about this topic is the plastic bag, the little tiny plastic bag. First thing is, it can be easily recycled quite a few times and repurposed. But let's look at organic cotton versus polyester PET. And I'm going to see here if I can, I guess I got all the heads here, so I can't see it, but I believe it's about 20,000. Yeah, 20,000, okay, plastic bags is the equivalent of one organic cotton bag. That's insane. I can go look here at polypropylene, woven and recycled, 45 reuses to be the same as that plastic bag. That is an unlikely thing to occur. LCAs don't lie. If they're honest with your LCA, they can tell you which is the better product every time. And this gets to that getting away from embedded energy, the CO2 that might be produced from that, and gets you to the actual use. So one single-use plastic bag is the equivalent of all these other things. Indeed, no plastics could doom our planet. We see it right now with COVID-19, with modern medicine. We talked before about waste. There was a Denstat report by the British Plastics Federation that suggested that if we got rid of plastic packaging alone, we'd end up with 2.7 times more greenhouse gas emissions. That's insane. If you believe in climate change, that is absolutely an insane number. You're beginning to see in the EU the admission that we may have made some grave errors in what we were banning and in what we were getting rid of. I hope that trend continues. So what went wrong? People loving plastics. It was easy, we get them, and it was really easy to throw them away. The incredible convenience. If you think back 40 years ago for paper, plastic went after paper. What did we say? You're deforesting the planet. Where are the animals going to go? What are we going to do? Get rid of the paper. Get rid of the paper now. The faster we do it, the more animals will live. Well, now it's the same thing, but instead of saying paper, they're saying it's plastic. Self-awareness of the planet. People are awakening. They understand we have limited resources. They target plastics. And again, this sounds like a little thing, but boy, it floats. Blame plastic. It's an easy visual proxy for all that's wrong with the world. But all materials see abuse. This picture here of garbage, there's metal, ceramics, glass, paper, and yes, some plastic. We've talked about how, especially in Asia, overall disposal is a mess. Recycling is still seemingly ignored for all kinds of materials for decades. We think things are being recycled, but oftentimes they simply get in a bin and end up going back into the garbage. In a certain way, industry and consumers are to blame with how they behave with the things that they have. But there's also 1,000 mitigating factors. You know, one of the stories I heard in Asia, which is a very sad story, situation, was people have their plastic bags that they use for the grocery. And these bags are everywhere, but some of them are filled with some noxious stuff. A lot of people have no plumbing that works. Even though the plumbing's there, it simply doesn't work. And so they have to go to the bathroom, or they have food waste or whatever waste they have, and they put it in the plastic bag, and then they head out, unless they happen to live right next door to it, they throw them onto trains. And so these trains are covered with plastic bags filled with human waste, food waste, garbage, and they go don't know where it goes. To be honest, I'm not sure where it goes, but something tells me it doesn't end up in a landfill. It may be what ends up in a river. And why does that happen? Because the people don't have a choice. If you're desperately poor, you're not worried about a recycling bin. You're worried about eating. You're worried about survival. These factors go in all different directions, including in Europe, the United States, Africa, Asia, the Middle East. It doesn't matter where you are, but it's hard to get people pointed in the direction that's the right one if they're desperately poor. Having the best LCA, for example, like I just said for a plastic bag, is simply not an excuse. We shouldn't be throwing things away. We should be looking at them as a resource. It could be metals, chemicals, minerals, ceramics, glass, plastics, wood and plant materials, whatever they are. We shouldn't just be throwing them away. In my house, I've done a lot of effort to fix that problem, and we put out a bin of garbage maybe once a month. And we put out 3 or 4 large-scale bins of recycled materials on our own. We're trying to do our part. So our industry has made its share of big mistakes, yeah. However, unintended plastics are indeed abused by all, especially in Asia. We talked about recycling being ignored. But even in design and use and in end of life, we have not played the role as an industry that we should have. We took it for granted and ended up being treated now like paper 40 years ago. Single use, complex laminates, add in a poor recycling infrastructure. It's just not a good situation. The structure exists for industrial recycling, that's terrific, but not for consumers. Being the best again, LCA, not an excuse. The reality is news exaggerated out of context and blatantly lied about our products and our materials. So it's our job to take responsibility to do what's right. We're the ones who have to lead the fight for truth, for what's right. So what can we do as an industry, as partners, as individuals? Again, a world without plastics, that's insanity. But a world without personal responsibility is absolute insanity. Realize most people just don't know. So it's not that they may be desperately poor or have other mitigating factors into why they throw things away or don't recycle. Now, all the things we just talked about, and there's far more than the little bit I brought up here, people just don't know about plastics or materials. They don't know that their hair is a polymer. They don't know that their skin's a polymer. They don't know the tree is a polymer. The wood's a polymer. They don't even know that their DNA is a polymer. We can lead or we can let someone else. We can let the politicians, we can let the media, we can let radical environmentalists. So the question is, what do you choose? What do I choose? What do we all choose? We can lead or someone else surely will. So I kind of look as an industry at basically four simple concepts. We need to be good citizens everywhere, consistently, built around a set of principles. I know Jim Fitterling at Dow is doing an absolutely tremendous job pushing this forward for our industry. I applaud him. I think he's absolutely an exemplary leader in our industry. But it's all of our parts to be good citizens. If we're in the plastics industry and we're throwing away plastic, that's probably wrong. If we're in the plastics industry and we're designing things that have no way to get back from whence they came, they're a large scale produced material, there's something wrong about that. We need to then also educate then everyone, our partners, our customers, our consumers, our schools. So not just about working with your customers. Oh, I'm selling you a product, here's what it's good for. It's helping go to the end game, working with people, say like a Kroger, with local municipalities, with the people who make sporting equipment. How can we make these products recyclable, repurposable? How can we take a lead in making that all happen? Who cares whose plastic bag it is? If we can, as a group, even as ANTEC, as SPE, put together the programs necessary so plastic bag recycling isn't in 1 out of 10 stores, it's in all the stores. I go around my corner to Meyer and I put all my plastics bags there. I end up with maybe a bag, maybe, I don't know, 2 feet by 2 feet stuffed with plastic bags. It takes me literally 4 months to get to that point. And it takes me 60 seconds to walk out the door and dump it. But where are the bins? Why isn't the plastics industry taking that lead? Why aren't we in the schools? Kindergarten right through high school, even in college, educating people about the wondrous materials we have and how they play a role in our very existence, not just in the products, but on our bodies themselves. Get proactive. We can't afford to be reactive. Look what happened to paper and look what's happening to us. It's utterly irrational. It seems like insanity. But in hindsight, it was insanity that we let this actually get to this point. We should be leading and not following. And fourth, maybe it's intimated through the education I just talked about, but we need to partner. Recycling, reuse, repurposing with everyone. I mentioned Kroger, electrical device companies, whoever it may be that uses our products, whoever it is that has to deal with the waste generated from our products. Let's be the example instead of being the target and the pariah. Then there's us as individuals. Similar concepts, top few are the same. We need to be good citizens, and that isn't just about plastics. It's just being about, not necessarily just, it's not about being a good person. It's being a part of your community, teaching your children, other people's children, setting an example for who we are, and building it around a set of principles that hopefully we're carrying through our own nations, our own countries. That also means educating everyone, your children, but also your friends, your colleagues, people you run across. They say something disparaging about plastics, something that doesn't make sense. Maybe in that moment, it makes sense to talk to someone for a minute. I've done that 1,000 times now. And what I find interesting every single time is they go, I didn't know that. I thought plastics are bad. I didn't know that. I thought they were all one material, one thing. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. And that means getting proactive instead of waiting to see something happen. Lead, don't follow by example. Yeah, we can recycle everything, but do more than that. Can you go speak at a school? Can you go speak at church or wherever the opportunity may present itself? Setting up local community programs, maybe with SBE support. And that, of course, means getting active on recycling, reuse, repurposing, and working with everyone in your community to make that all happen. We can make a big difference collectively if we really want to. It's not just being a member of an association like SBE. It's not simply working for a company and following their lead. It's what can we do as individuals to make people understand just how important plastics and polymers are to our world and what role they play. We can do this. I believe we not only have the best materials on the face of this earth, but I'll argue because it's complicated and cool and it's good stuff, we have the best minds on this earth. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. I was only able to touch on little pieces of the subject, and it's odd not actually having people in front of me to talk to. And I apologize if I've had any grammatical errors. Fact is, right now I'm working like 14 hours a day and kind of going insane. I thought I'd actually not be busy doing COVID-19, but it's only gotten much busier, which I guess I should be thankful and blessed for that. Here's information on how you can contact me if you hate me. Our website, if you want to make comments about that, or if you maybe want help from us to do anything in plastics or polymers. All right, thank you. Jason, back to you, bud.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Adam. Just so everyone, if you're not familiar with the platform that we're using, on the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A button. If you have any questions that you would like to pose to Adam, you can type them in there and I will get through all of them as we proceed. Just to start us off, Adam, one of the questions that came in was, is it too late to get back to square one with plastic waste in the environment? And if not, how do we do that?
You know, I think in a way it is hard to get back to square one, but I think you have to be persistent about it. And I'll just go back to the example of paper. So we're all of a sudden up to a point where people want to make paper bottles, right? So 40 years ago, kill paper, that industry's evil, destroys the trees. And somehow it's taken them, sadly, 40 years to seize on this opportunity of disparaging plastics. But I think we can get back to a different square one, a different start by, again, this incremental, persistent, overwhelming effort of telling people what plastics really are. I'm looking here at I think it's M. Young Kim who's asked a question or made some comments. And one of them was about COVID-19 and, the masks, the real masks that are most effective are made with plastics. Why isn't the plastics industry out there as a whole, maybe through SBE, putting ads out there talking about the fact that plastics are helping save the planet? Where is that? Whether it's from a mask to the sterile bottle of water, right? Whatever it may be. Why aren't we doing that? I think we can get to a new square one. I think the fact is it's individuals can do a lot, but what's the leadership of these various organizations? Where are they focusing their efforts? And who's calling up Jim Fitterling to say, great job, Jim, what can I do to help, right? I think Jim Fitterling is, again, an outstanding example of taking the leadership mantle as best he can while running a company, but he can't do it alone. I hope that answers the question. I mean, it's about education more than anything else. And it's about putting out a public presence for that education.
So you touched on municipal recycling versus industrial recycling. Can you comment on the percentage of those? Which one is generating more potential waste? And if the municipal one is indeed greater, what are some steps that can be taken to rectify the situation?
Industrial recycling is kind of this hidden thing. It's big and it's done all the time. So if I'm making black fenders and I don't use all my pellets or I have defective fenders, I can grind them up and put them right back on the hopper and there they go, right? I can do that. There are lots of companies that aren't allowed to do that for whatever reason. And so I've worked with a few companies actually based here in Ohio, who actually go out there and try and buy all the material. And that's where for industrial recycling, it's highly fractured. But it's where the most material is. That's, I'll call it not necessarily virgin, but where you know exactly what it is. You know what its provenance is. So it came from this factory, it came from this place. There's buying and trading. There's all kinds of markets going on. They're just fragmented, but it exists. I suspect the volume of material that's recycled, tried to find the numbers. I suspect that it's smaller than consumer materials that are put into the waste stream. And that's where it becomes challenging. As you have the little recycle thing for plastics on the bottom, little 3 arrows, and what it has there is there's like 7 kinds of material. How do you separate that? Right now, that's not a part of making the product, right? People want to use all kinds of spectral analysis to identify materials. Somehow you have to tag or put in something that allows you to see it. And then if it's heavily filled or has heavy dyes in it, do I see it? If it's coated, how do I see it? How do I scan it? How do I separate it? How do I wash it? How do I clean it? A lot of municipalities have actually given up completely on recycling. Not even just for plastics, but for everything. It's just easier to send it to the dump. So right now, there's no legislation that mandates recycling, right? I don't know what that impact would be on people's property taxes to start putting in the real systems that might be required, considering that they're not really very advanced. Could even involve literal hand sorting. Where are you going? On the flip side, the materials that are the most easy to recycle are those plastic bags. You go to the grocery store, you get lots of plastic bags, you can get paper bags. All right, forget about the debate of which one's better. All I do is go around the corner, not even a quarter mile from me, and I can recycle my plastic bags. Where's the education and notification for that? So most of the material, Jason, I think is actually consumer waste. It probably mimics to some extent real industry, so it's probably mostly polypropylene, polyethylene. And that's the one area that seems to be utterly ignored as far as recycling is concerned. And then I have all these other plastics to go along with it.
So there's a couple of questions that are coming in and a couple of comments that are being made, and I'm actually getting some text messages as well that are all related to cost. And so comments related to if we want to educate the public in these large campaigns, which is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, costs related to fix the municipality thing. Is it driven by a legislature in your opinion? Or how are we?
I think it's driven. I think it's in part driven by both. And I guess I'll say this because I don't want to give away what my political leanings are or not. I just want to talk about the facts. And you know what? There's some times where I'll simply say this. If we don't try to put forth legislation that protects our industry and guides us to begin with, don't worry, someone else will. And right now it's to ban our materials and to ban our products. So when someone says, oh, it's going to cost this much to Dow or BASF or the Acme Plastic Company, RTP, whoever it may be, the bottom line is, what's the cost of losing your entire company, right? I mean, that's a huge challenge. So I think legislation will play a significant role, but we need to put our lobbyists out there. But those politicians who will pass this legislation, if they're as uninformed as most Americans are about plastics, we're in trouble. So we better jump on that education bandwagon, and we better do it as a group. Because doing it individually, I mean, first, it's unfair. I mean, Jim Fitterling's doing a good job there, but it's not like I see a dozen Dow commercials, all right, every week on the TV telling me about stuff. It's not like I see it in Better Homes and Gardens. So as far as cost goes, boy, if we all got together as an industry, all the members of SPE from a corporate standpoint, put some money in, that education, that positive education might begin to reach some of those folks. We might begin to get a better image. And the legislation, if there's legislation required, if the complex recycling efforts can be improved upon, grants can be generated to study it, develop it, or to put in equipment, whatever myriad of ways there are to move forward, it will be better than if everyone decides to move forward without us and then to ban us. Does that kind of answer the question, Jason, or am I off?
It does. To kind of follow down that path, in terms of innovation, are you seeing innovation from the resin suppliers? Are you seeing innovation from the product designers? And I know the easiest answer is to say from all of the above. But
No. I can answer that.
But if I can, I'll just finish the question because it was related to Volcat and IBM. And so you have something that has shown to be potentially exciting in this field, but the cost is prohibitive at this point in time.
And tell me a little bit about Volcat.
That's the catalyst system, I believe, that is related to polyesters, where you're basically
Polymerize.
You're basically creating a pressure cooker.
Yeah, cracking. I just call it. It's just freaking cracking. You know, I'll give a little bit of is there innovation? I think the technology by Procter & Gamble to make everything clean again. I mean, I live here, 2 miles away from the Procter & Gamble Research Center here in Cincinnati. I think is amazing technology. I think costs have to be driven down, but companies like Procter & Gamble don't come up with technologies unless they feel the economics are there to work, right? I would tend to think IBM doesn't come up with things unless they believe the technology is there to work. I think it creates there's a big effort, but I think innovation is starting to blossom in a lot of places, and part of it's out of just sheer survival, right? If I don't do this, someone else will legislate us out of existence, right? Whether it's right or wrong is irrelevant. The fact is they're trying to do it. So I see innovation like I just mentioned at Procter & Gamble. I hear about Volcat. I've heard about similar things for PVC, okay? It really comes down to who comprises 80% of the plastic waste, right, that we see, and how can we tackle that? It doesn't make a lot of sense to tackle the bottom 20%. It's going after the 80. And so I think it was Solvay that has a technology for depolymerizing PVC. I think that's interesting. But you can also go the other direction. Like I said, and some of this is proprietary, but you can take plastics that are waste plastics and you can upgrade their performance dramatically. And I see quite a few companies beginning to look at that. The challenge for certain materials is one company I work with, a lot of their material comes in and the only place they can put it, their recycling plastics company, is into garden hoses, the inner lining of a garden hose. So it's black, you don't have to see it. I can make it black. Okay, great. Working with them, we began to realize that, you know, there's some virgin plastics that if we upgrade with chemistry, the waste polypropylene, we actually have materials that are better than virgin polypropylene, right? And we get to say it's recycled and we buy it less expensively. Because you could upgrade the polypropylene too, but if I can take the trash polypropylene and suddenly upgrade it to the same as the regular polypropylene, if it was upgraded, which one's going to be less expensive? Which one's going to have a higher margin? And so I've spent time over the last probably 5-6 years now how to upgrade recycled plastics. Tremendous innovation starting to be developed there. I actually think the innovation of how these materials, how materials of all kinds, but again, it's a generic plastics mixture in most trash, that they can be ground up and actually serves as a reinforcement that otherwise would not have been cost effective to put into asphalt. Right? Asphalt's about as cheap as you're going to get, bitumen. But I start adding higher molecular weight polymers or any kind to that mixture, and you suddenly get better road performance. That's pretty amazing innovation. I think when you step back and you say, this is a resource, it's available to me, this is how much is available to me, suddenly begin to say, I can either take that, recycle it, use it here, I can upgrade it, use it here, or I can depolymerize it and use it there. So I think innovation is tremendous here. It would be nice to see more government support for some of those things as far as grant applications go. That would be nice. It'd be nice to see at universities research focused on that, but with industrial partners helping back those professors so that they get an idea as, hey, is this realistic or not? Am I going down the right path? I think innovation's there. I run an innovation consulting firm with my business partner. We got about 30 people who we have in our network. This space is one of the big spaces emerging right now, is how to upgrade and or recycle chemicals and plastics.
So going further down the path, it seems that a lot of people may feel like Sisyphus, where we're just trying to push this big ball uphill continually. And so what do you think is the catalyst so that it's actually pushing the ball downhill? And I guess going on that, do you think that plastics will eventually come out of this war on top?
I think we'll kind of come out on top, because when things like COVID-19 happen, they kind of turn around and come back to plastics. I think you have to do what you just said in every action you take. You have to make it that it's the ball rolling downhill. A municipality has to actually have a market to sell the plastic in, right? That even if it's a cost overall to the town, it can cut costs in general, right? So if I'm spending $5 million to do X, if it can be cut to $3 million a year to do X or a month to do X, because I'm selling my recycled plastic, that's a big deal. That's the ball rolling downhill. It's found money, right? In the case of the recycled upgraded plastics that I was talking about, we went to companies first and we said, what do you want? We want recycled plastics. Why don't you use them now? This looks like there's quite a bit for you that you could use, you know, in the current market. And they come back and say, well, there's no standards around it. All the virgin plastic companies won't touch it in their facilities with a 1,000-foot pole. So I go back to the recycling companies that I'm working with on plastics. They said, look, these guys, if they have 5, 10, 20%, can put a stupid label on it with a green tree or some other recycle label and say it's, you know, partially made out of this. If we take your stuff and upgrade it, they can use it right the way it is. You can charge less than the virgin material. You're doing some chemistry, which you weren't doing before. Go to the shoe company, for example, that we spoke with, big boot manufacturer, and they are thrilled that they could spend less money and have a better product. And not only have a better product, all right, spend less money, but they could take their brand and make it greener. So when you sit in a room with a bunch of folks and you're trying to think, what can I do with the material? It's a holistic view you have to make. And you know, Jason, as a business manager, you know, if you have the right product and it blows them away, saves them money, right? And their processes cost less, performs better than what you're competing against, You know how to sell that, right, Jason?
It's a lot easier, that's for sure.
That's what we did with so far the work that I've been doing with plastics companies that are doing recycled plastics. The thing is most of them are equipped to chop things up, melt them, pelletize, right? They don't necessarily have chemists on staff. It's consultants and or chemists that they can hire that can change the things that they can do. They're just not aware of it. That's where people like SPE can help educate these companies on what's possible, what can be done. Maybe blending with their virgin products, right? Or maybe it's a user like a Kroger, a Coca-Cola, a big shoe manufacturer. It's just kind of thinking about what would you do? What would you, we like to call it the what must be truths. And you sit down and you say, for this to be true, these things have to happen. These other things must be true. And you put it all together. That's what we did for the company making recycled plastics that went from silly garden hoses to shoes at 2 times the price. Very profitable, that cut their costs. You need to kind of sit down and walk through those scenarios. And then after that, you can get to the chemistry. Does that make any sense, Jason?
Yep, it does. And Adam, the last question that we have for you today, prior to letting you off the hook, is related to you had some very alarming stats related to China, where it was the only red, or Asia in general, the only red countries that are on the map. What can we do to help?
You know, first, the countries have to want to help, but it's, you know, every country has its own priorities, right? For whatever reason. Whether I like China or not, it's irrelevant. China is making advances and is trying to do what they can, because otherwise it leads to their own self-destruction. I think it's how do we share technology and how do we develop markets for the materials that are out there. In Asia, what ends up in the ocean, half of it is fishing nets. Polypropylene fishing nets, nylon fishing nets, right? Mostly polypropylene, lots of polyethylene. The fact is, the fishermen wouldn't be dumping it in the ocean to save fuel costs if there was someone there to buy it on the other end, right? Other conversations we've had in greater Asia is, you know, there are a lot of desperately poor people, including in China. And if they knew how to sort plastic, however crudely they could do it, and they could be paid, which what for them in that part of the world is a lower pay rate overall, maybe they would be more than happy to collect all that plastic in the river and have it recycled because they'd make some money off it, right? There are a lot of things that we could take a look at that haven't been looked at to not only help society develop and advance and move forward to make people's lives better, but to simultaneously clean up the entire trash problem. All right.
Excellent. Well, that's perfect. I thank you for your time today, Adam. I'm sure that everyone got a lot from your talk, and everyone had your contact information on the last slide. And so if there's any further questions that you wanted to have directly with Adam, I encourage everyone to reach out to him. So that concludes our morning session for now.